that we have tonight. We have it since 2 or 3 years, and yeah, this let me also thank, or my first thank goes to Michael for putting this event tonight again together. Give a warm welcome and thanks to Michael. This is really awesome. I come to the Stammtisch and since 2012. And then first I met Michael, and what was come out of the Stammtisch is just amazing. Tonight we are here at TU München. Later on we will hear information about TU München from Andranik. This is really awesome. And tonight we have, for sure, we have also, you know, the Bitcoin price tonight reached an all-time high. We have two different things tonight. We have our topic of how to make blockchain untraceable. And we have another topic, maybe you found it on your place where you sit. There's a small paper a member of our community has written. And I start with this right now because it's really important for us. You see, Bitcoin went through the so-called scaling debate for the last 2 years. And we as a community, we also have a stand here. And this information is written on this small paper, so you can, during the talks or during the small breaks between the talks, maybe you can find time, read it through. In the midst of November, there should be a hard fork, a planned hard fork. And we would like, in the end, we would like to know from you, small vote, are you for or against this 2x fork? So you have time reading this. Maybe there are questions. We can answer or discuss questions later on. And we want to have this small vote. So with this vote, what do we want to do with this vote? We want to go to, afterwards, we want to go to Reddit and let the world know what Bitcoin Munich is thinking, because as you know, Bitcoin, this culture, this great culture of discussion and debate, and it's important also that other meetups maybe follow our example, and yeah, let the world know what the local community thinks. All right, so we have the topic tonight, Juten, Zcash, Monero, Mimblewimble. Why is it important? First of all, question to your audience: who of you has Bitcoin? Okay, everybody that raised his hands was clapping during the all-time high. Who of you, maybe just an observation, who of you has Monero? I see also a lot. And Zcash? Okay, great. So I think you know why we address this topic. We address this topic because Bitcoin, nobody cares if you sign up. You can be pseudonymous. But the thing is that after some time, if you make transactions, it's really, really hard to stay anonymous. So the really important thing is how can this be solved? And it can be solved through new technologies coming up from Monero. Can be solved through new technologies from Zcash. Monero has the so-called ring signatures, and Zcash has the so-called zero knowledge proof. And we will learn tonight more about these technologies and how they help us to stay, to be not traceable during our transactions, which is an important thing. We also will hear information about Mimblewimble, which is a new technology. I'm really curious to hear about that, which maybe in the future is for sure implemented in a new coin called Grin, or in a Bitcoin sidechain. All right, I just have a real quick look where we are. I think I have, anytime you have questions, just let me know. After, sure, okay, the timetable, that's important. We have, first of all, we have Andranik giving us information about TU Munich. where I know that Team Munich is really, really engaged in the blockchain and crypto space, and Ranik is really active in the crypto scene here in Munich. Then after this, we have Paige Peterson from Zcash. She's community manager, and we will hear from her about the history of Zcash and about, maybe also an outlook. I'm really curious to hear more about it's for all of you who know, Zcash is 1 year old and has this funding ceremony where they have 5 or 6 people coming together and doing something which makes it really, really, really secure in the beginning. I'm curious to learn more about that. So after Paige, we have Justin. Justin is here, not yet here, but he will come, hopefully, and he's looking for a parking space, which is really hard here in Schwabing. Justin gives us more information about Monero and the information about the technologies. And yeah, as I said, then finally Mimblewimble about this new technology. And we have then Q&A. All right, that's our timetable. That's the plan for tonight. If you have questions, let us know. Also, maybe after the talks, maybe 2 questions, and then for the Q&A.
Okay, so I guess I'm all wired up now with 2 microphones because we have the live stream here. First of all, welcome to the Technical University of Munich. Who's here for the first time? Okay, lots of people, very good. So I guess you will like it, and I hope so. We are hosting this meetup today from the Blockchain Research Group. So everything that you want to know about us, you can find on this website here, blockchain.tum.de. And maybe a little bit about us. We are quite a large group right now. Oh, that's about me. Okay, let me see. Somehow it... Okay, so you see the technology is a little bit outdated here. Okay, so this is our blockchain research group. We have lots of people. We are now about 15 people. As you can see, some faces here. And the most important thing that I wanted to show you is our activities. So what we do is we research the potential of blockchain technologies for different industries. So for example, media industry, very broadly the sharing economy, also supply chain, finance, and so on, insurance. Then we have a focus on organizational processes. So we look at how does blockchain influence or replace infrastructures for organizational structures. For example, financial transactions or marketing or even things like HRM. So we look at these things. And we also look at emerging competitive landscapes due to new technologies. So for example, we have mapped all the startups that are active in the blockchain space. And you can also find our paper about that on our website. There we will find a huge overview of what kind of startups there are out there and also the valuation and where it comes from. Also, we do our own experiments. So here is a screenshot of the TUM blockchain, the TUM coin, where we are working on right now. And what we are doing with this is we look at how different parameters influence interactions on the blockchain. So for example, we look at what factors, for example, does anonymity play a role for how people interact. So you can see here in the second row, you can change the anonymity of the blockchain. And then we look at how interactions work. So this is one example where we could, for example, compare Zcash to some non-anonymous setting in the lab. And this is the kind of research that we do. Here you see some transactions which are not anonymous anymore. Okay, so very briefly about our research group. If you have any interest in our work, please refer to our website. And I hand over to Paige, I guess. And once again, welcome and have a nice evening.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here. It's my first time in Munich, and yeah, I'm really excited. By show of hands, how many people were in Prague this past weekend? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna give a very similar presentation, so I'm glad not many of you were there for that. And I just got a call that my credit card detected abnormal spending because, you know, I'm not in the States, so sorry about that. I put it on mute. So yeah, my name's Paige Peterson. I live in the United States, and I do community and some communication and documentation work for the Zcash company who create the Zcash protocol. I've been in this space for probably about 4 years now. I helped organize the San Francisco Bitcoin meetup for a couple years. That was really fun. Got to meet a lot of different Bitcoin related companies and individuals, especially, you know, being in San Francisco. A lot of people tend to go through that area. And yeah, it's really exciting to work for Zcash because I have I'm really excited in, you know, the potential for cryptocurrencies to, you know, displace the outdated systems that we have for money. And simultaneously, I'm a really big privacy advocate for just internet privacy and security in general. So yeah, it kind of combines my two favorite things to be enthusiastic about. So I'm gonna talk about Zcash and what internet money means. So to start it off, let's like kind of not think about cryptocurrencies. Let's just like consider what internet money might mean to you. Can you all see that? Do we need to like turn lights down or anything, or are you good? Okay. So not thinking about cryptocurrencies, something like money that's based on the internet. Like you want everyone to be able to use it. So you need it to be secure. You don't want anyone's money to be stolen, either like, you know, using the internet in the network side of things or the client side of things. You want people to be able to protect their own money within their own side of it and within the network itself. You need it to be accessible, so anywhere that the internet is accessible, you want this money to be accessible as well. Something that's not necessarily internet related but money related is fungibility. So you need the money to be units of the money to be indistinguishable from other units of the money. So 1 unit of any currency should be equal to any other single unit of that currency. for it to kind of maintain a stable value. You don't want to be able to say, I will accept this token, but not this token, even though they should be equal. And you want it obviously to be private because no one wants their finances displayed for anyone to see, or just like people that they don't give permission to see. So that's kind of where I want to start with this presentation. And then next I want to consider what Bitcoin and most other cryptocurrencies do, and whether they fill all of the needs for this. So Bitcoin is fundamentally secure. It has a pretty strong network, and pretty much wherever the internet is accessible, you can also use Bitcoin. So those two things it really has going for it. There are a couple, the other side of things which are rather related is the privacy and fungibility. So it's been historically thought that Bitcoin was private because people on Silk Road or whatever thought that they could get away with using it. However, there are companies that are created specifically to analyze and research that's specifically done to analyze the Bitcoin blockchain. So as soon as you link an identity to any one address, you can kind of trace back in time and watch forward in time any of the transactions that are happening. And if you can link multiple identities, then you can basically see the finances that are flowing between individuals on the network. And this is related to fungibility because if you can track specific Bitcoin, then you can say, oh, this historically went through this person, so I'm not going to accept that Bitcoin, but I'll accept this Bitcoin because it's legitimate, or whatever criteria you may have for a legitimate token in Bitcoin. So those two things, at least regarding cryptocurrencies, a lot of people in the space feel like are really problematic. And just this general idea of linkability is becoming a much greater concern, especially with the companies that are created just to analyze and sell the data that they are able to extract to various organizations and groups. So if you have your identity linked to an address, then it might have already been sold to some group that you might not want to know that you use that Bitcoin for. So, and a lot of the proposed answers historically in Bitcoin have been kind of layer 2 type things. So like taking a bunch of Bitcoins and mixing them together. And there are some newer proposals such as Mimblewimble, which we'll hear about later, which are really interesting. However, there's some issues with how it's going to be implemented if it were to be implemented into Bitcoin. So I guess the fundamental concept of Zcash is to have this privacy at a core layer. So it's a part of the fundamental protocol, and there's no distinguishing it from, there's no layer 2 where you're trying to have privacy. If you can consider that it's rather easy to make something public once it is already private, but it's a lot more difficult to make something private when it's already in this public network. So taking that concept and putting privacy in the core is what really Zcash is trying to do. So Zcash as internet money is basically what this is about, and we launched October 28th which is about 1 year ago. So if maybe this meetup wants to do a Zcash party or something, we're trying to see if there's different communities around the world that, especially people that have Zcash and want to celebrate that we're 1 year strong. Totally support that and let us know if that's something that you're interested in doing. So what Zcash really does is enable the properties of blockchains and the properties of encryption to be combined. So you can consider attempting, for example, on Bitcoin, trying to encrypt some of the a transaction before it's stored on the blockchain. That becomes problematic because then the nodes in the network can't verify that that transaction is valid, that it hasn't been spent, those tokens haven't been spent in the past and whatnot. So being able to encrypt transaction data on a blockchain is extremely difficult. And that's what ZK snarks, the technology that Zcash uses, allows for by generating a zero knowledge proof, which essentially proves that you have access to the tokens that you're spending, that you haven't spent them in the past, and all doing that without actually revealing the data itself. There's a lot of cryptography and mathematics that go into it, and there's a lot of resources online, and more resources online. I'm not going into that here, but essentially know that you're able, with zero knowledge proofs in Zcash, you're able to encrypt the transaction data, but still verify it. The nodes in the network are still able to verify that encrypted data is valid without reading it. And yeah. So the initial implementation thus far, we started with an implementation that does both what we call shielded addresses and transparent addresses. So Zcash is a fork of Bitcoin with this zero knowledge technology baked in. So we decided, at least at first, to keep these transparent addresses within the network, which are essentially Bitcoin addresses. Everything that's sent or received from those is transparent on the blockchain. And then with the shielded addresses, you're using the zero knowledge proofs to encrypt that side of the transaction. So can you see? I don't know if you can see the black text. That might be a little more difficult. But so essentially, this is showing an arrow in that has a question mark for the amount of Zcash that's going in, and also a question mark with the amount of Zcash that is going out, and also a question mark for the amount of change. And then the actual fee, the transaction fee, is transparent. So we always recommend that people use the standard transaction fee, because if you were to use a unique transaction fee, people analyzing Zcash might be able to identify patterns or something. So we definitely recommend using the default fee. And what is also another great benefit about these about the shielded addresses is that we don't need to, like Bitcoin, generate a new address for each transaction for the change, because the transactions between two shielded addresses are totally encrypted. You can just send the change right back to the original address and just keep using that. For now, so this graphic right here is showing 10 Zcash going in, 8 Zcash going out, 1.999 Zcash as change, and 0.0001 Zcash as the fee. So that's pretty much a basic Bitcoin transaction. And then we also employ, I think we still have this, but we're intending to change it, which is Bitcoin, all the Bitcoin clients generate a new address for all of the change. We're considering just getting rid of that and making the change go back to the original address anyway. which not as a way to like remove privacy for people, but just to kind of show that it's not the best, it's not a really good way to achieve privacy. So if you really want to have privacy, then you should just be using the shielded addresses. So yeah, with these addresses, you can send and receive in between them, and the privacy is specific to the address. So if you're sending from a shielded address, then that spend is not recorded on the blockchain. But if you're sending to a transparent address, then the input is recorded on the blockchain. So you have to kind of consider how you're using Zcash, at least at this point. The goal in the future is to get rid of transparent addresses. So everything's encrypted. However, for now, there are some really big benefits for having these transparent addresses, namely just third-party integration and the resource consumption that the shielded addresses use. So I guess quite a few of you have Zcash, as you raised your hand. How many people actually use shielded addresses? So I'm assuming everyone else is just like, you know, holding on to it and speculating, and that's, it is what it is. That's fine. But that's one of the reasons why we chose to keep the transparent addresses in while we're improving the shielded address side of things, so that it's easy for exchanges and just like various cryptocurrency wallets just to straight up integrate Zcash, because the transparent side is like essentially Bitcoin. So it's like very easy to add into your Bitcoin wallet where you support all these other cryptocurrencies. So that's our main reason for that. And then I mentioned the resource consumption. Right now, I might touch on it later in a bit in the presentation, but I'll mention the resource consumption for shielded addresses is pretty bad. Because you used it before. It's about 3 gigs of RAM for 40 seconds. So you're not doing a shielded transaction on your mobile phone, that's for sure. But in the future, we have all of this documented in our blog and whatnot. But so right now, the version of Zcash is called Sprout. The next generation of Zcash will be called Sapling. It will require a hard fork. However, it will improve the shielded resource consumption drastically. So it's 3 gigs of RAM right now for 40 seconds. It will be, our benchmarks show us 40 megabytes for about 7 seconds. I don't know. Are we doing questions? Should we wait? Okay, go ahead.
I'm just curious about the governance.
Oh, the governance of the company?
Just in general, when you do a hard fork.
Oh yeah. I'll talk about that later. But, yeah, that's a good question though. So obviously, if you, I suggest people that want to try doing a shielded transaction and have a laptop that they want to do it on, install one of the various clients that support it. There's clients for Linux, Windows, and Mac that all support the shielded transactions. But again, not for Android or iOS yet. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. Great. So right now we basically have four exchanges and wallet providers. We have these level 1 and level 2 integration, which level 1 is just like Bitcoin, the Bitcoin shielded transparent addresses. Level 2 is the working with the zero knowledge proofs and the shielded addresses. And then this ZK Snark resource constraint, again, improving. We don't have like a specific date for this. We're just saying 2018. Sometime a roadmap hopefully will soon come out for when we intend to do that. But we're doing a lot of the research right now. And I should mention that the Zcash company has who we call the 7 scientists. They're the original creators of the zero cash and zero coin papers and protocols. And maybe I should mention that. So the history of this zero knowledge proof in cryptocurrencies started with zero coin. And this paper came out in like 2013. I believe it was presented first at the San Jose Bitcoin conference. And, you know, all those scientists went to the Bitcoin core and were like, hey, look, we resolved all the privacy problems with Bitcoin. Why don't you add this in? And they were like, well, it's kind of inefficient. So, and we were like managing a really big economy right now. So we're not gonna think about that yet. And then that migrated with better improvements on the efficiency into zero cash by a similar, some of the same scientists, but some additional scientists as well. And then Zcash is an implementation of zero cash with some additional improvements. But yes, all of these scientists that have been researching zero knowledge proofs in blockchains are basically advisors for us. So they're doing all the research to make it zero knowledge proof in Zcash even better. Yeah, and that graphic shows exactly what I was referring to. So I want to talk about the improvements of more people using shielded addresses in Zcash. So right now you can probably assume that this is kind of what the network looks like. So there's a bunch of transparent addresses happening. If you were to analyze the Zcash blockchain, which we hope some researchers actually do and tell us, you know, and tell our users how much is actually being shielded at this point, like, and how much people are actually using the shielded side of things. But we're assuming it's pretty low. And you can kind of think of an anonymity set as a pool that you can't distinguish any one unit in that pool from each other. So the larger the anonymity set, the more privacy you have. So for example, if everyone in this room were wearing a mask and like someone like, I don't know, won a game or something, or I don't know, we wanted to identify one of you, it would be much more difficult to identify one of you versus like a group of 3 of us wearing masks, for example. So the larger the set, the larger the privacy guarantees. So we want to go, especially with the snark improvements, go in that direction where the pool is much larger and privacy for everyone is better guaranteed. I also want to mention that if you do want to play around with shielded addresses, you actually benefit more from just using a shielded address kind of as a proxy. So even if you want to use Zcash on your phone still, you can have your clients on your laptop, which supports the shielded addresses, and send from that client to your mobile wallet, and then the history of that transaction of those coins is completely broken. There's a few considerations that you want to have, but generally the fact that other people are using shielded addresses and that you might use a shielded address before you send to a transparent address is a much greater improvement on the privacy than if you were to just use transparent addresses all the time. So, yeah. So internet money is, like as a general concept, it should be used by everyone from like individuals to enterprise. And we've seen a lot of instances within this first year of Zcash for why people why people, from individuals to businesses, want to have privacy when they're using a blockchain, or just with money in general. So there's actually there's this foundation, nonprofit called Courage Foundation, and they currently accept donations for a variety of truth tellers, you might say, basically for legal funds for people that have been put in jail for various reasons that others may or may not agree with those reasons for. So in particular, there was this one journalist that shared a link about a private company that essentially landed him in jail, and then there was this legal fund that was being raised, and the FBI decided that they would subpoena the payment processor that they were using to collect the donations in order to identify the individuals that were donating to this person or donating to their legal fund. And as a result, the Courage Foundation decided that they wanted to at least provide the option for supporters of Barrett Brown, and they also support Edward Snowden and historically Chelsea Manning and a few others, their legal defense, just giving people the option to donate privately. So they added that to all of their beneficiaries. Similarly, WikiLeaks also found it beneficial to add Zcash after having Bitcoin and Litecoin support for a few years. And similarly, we're seeing reports from people in Venezuela that are interested in using Zcash. And I mean, they're interested in using cryptocurrencies in general because their currency is hyper inflated. You might have heard last week that one Venezuelan bolivar has reached parity with one Satoshi, which equals to about 2,000% inflation in a number of years. So, regardless of what you think of fiat money in general, like this situation can happen. And this is just the present situation that is happening right now. This historically has happened to other countries as well. So we're seeing individuals in these countries who have an oppressive regime that are trying to find a way out so that they can securely store value. So they're not just like spending all their money on food immediately just so that their savings doesn't keep crashing. They're looking into different methods, and relatedly, the Venezuelan government does not want them to be doing this. So some people are looking into Zcash as a means of providing better privacy for that. And then, from those kind of individual use cases, you can also, just generally consider private use cases. Like you don't want anyone to know that you're like what your finances are. And similarly with businesses, they don't want their competitors. They don't want their competitors to learn about their supply chain, where their revenue's coming from, and how much they're spending. So privacy is extremely important for businesses, and similarly with large transactions with banks. Banks are interested in blockchains, as we all might be aware, but they're definitely not interested in the transparent side of things. In the public aspects of things. They want to be able to secure their transaction data just so that they can see it and no one else. And something that is really useful with the property of encryption. So you might have in the past just like encrypted a PDF before, and it was just, you encrypted it and it was a password to access it. It's a pretty basic tool that a lot of people use, especially when you're sending documents over email or something. So you can use that same property within Zcash for added utility of the money of the blockchain. So you can say, here's this key, this password or key. So only, you know, this individual or this group of people can have access to this transaction, but not the entire world. So that's just like a basic fundamental thing that's very useful when you're considering the benefits of Zcash and other cryptocurrencies that are private. So yeah, actually, I kind of want to talk to this question now about like governance and hard forks, because we're not like explicitly sure the mechanism that we're doing. We're talking about it a lot, but you know, actually, shout out to Monero. They do hard forks like every 6 months or something, and their community's just used to it. Like all of the miners and the nodes, they've just gotten used to this process. So, you know, it's not impossible. Like if the hard fork is beneficial for everyone, like, you know, if you're improving the zero knowledge proof so that you can use it on your phones, then well, how is that? It's not really controversial, so it's rather easy for people to get behind, and it's been done before in other cryptocurrencies. It's only really a big deal with Bitcoin because everyone's making it into a big deal. So yeah, so we're not really worried about hard forks, kind of, I guess, extending on the governance idea. So Zcash is currently run by or developed by the Zcash company. You might consider that there might be a conflict of interest as a for-profit company running this. We do simultaneously have a Zcash Foundation, which is, you know, we support each other, especially in these early days, but the people on the board of the Zcash Foundation are not anyone that work for the Zcash company. So those are separate, and the idea is to move the kind of infrastructure development over to the foundation side of things. One thing that's really beneficial about having a company kind of start Zcash is the bootstrapping thing. We are able to get investors before we launched so that we could pay developers and keep it a healthy improvements on the system. So yeah, I think that's one thing that kind of differentiates us from a lot of other projects in the space or cryptocurrencies in the space. And some people that prefer Monero, for example, prefer it because it's more community minded and community focused in terms of development. And Zcash just kind of has this more we're using this company mindset in order to kind of like help get things off the ground. And, you know, it's a lot easier to do business development. It's a lot easier to reach out to exchanges and wallets and, you know, pay people to do all these things. So I think that's why we've seen a pretty healthy growth over the past year, because we are able to sustain these projects. And not to say that we don't have any community-related aspects to Zcash. There's a really large user community and developer community. Zcash only supports the Linux Debian client. So any other Zcash wallet you use was made or is supported by some other group of people. So there's clearly an incentive for our community to create these different projects based off of the infrastructure, and we don't need to, and we can then focus on the infrastructure itself and making it better, etc. And I guess it was mentioned in the intro, interest in learning about this ceremony thing, but so I'll briefly mention it. There's a lot of cool stories actually online. If you've ever heard of this Radio Lab podcast, it's a NPR, which is the National Public Radio in the US. They did a really cool piece on the ceremony. So I recommend checking that out. But essentially, in order to use zero-knowledge proofs in an efficient way, there needs to be a shared set of parameters that is generated in a certain way. And you can kind of think of these parameters as a public key. So everyone sees them, everyone uses them to create the zero-knowledge proofs in Zcash. However, in order for any system that has a public key with an associated private key, the public key is always derived from the private key. But with this system, the private key is actually what we call toxic waste. So if any single person had the full private key, they would be able to inflate the Zcash currency and counterfeit and basically, mint as many Zcash as they wanted. So we did this really elaborate process, which we called the ceremony, but it involved different stations of people that generated just a shard of the public key and the private key, and then so the idea was, there's so many interesting elements that go into it. I just recommend you looking into it, but essentially each station had their own shard of the public key and private key, and they destroyed the private key aspect. So where the public key was shards were all brought together, and then that's what is used as the parameters in Zcash. And it's such that if any one station in that ceremony was able to successfully destroy their private key shard, then the entire ceremony is safe and the parameters are safe. So we're fairly confident. We've had audits on this, especially one of the stations was hosted by a security audit company, and they basically analyzed their whole station and afterwards and did a security analysis of if there was any potential attack on their node or anything like that, and they didn't. They came to the conclusion that there probably was no issue with someone accessing their shard of the private key. So if you believe that one auditor, then you know that the rest is safe. If you believe that Peter Todd destroyed his shard of the private key, then you believe that the ceremony is safe, etc. So definitely recommend looking more into it. But it is a really cool cryptographic thing that's never really happened before. So it makes for a really good story. So we've had a lot of growth in the past year, and we have a lot of things that we're planning on doing. I don't know how much time I have left. I'm sorry. How much? I could keep talking, but so, okay, I'll just talk about a couple other things that are really cool upcoming. So we recently did our first test of how our implementation of a atomic swap between Zcash and Bitcoin. So that's kind of in an early experimental phase. We're intending on kind of fleshing that out and making that more usable. But that essentially means a decentralized exchange between two cryptocurrencies. You don't need to trust a centralized exchange. So relatedly, we're also working on this concept called payment disclosure, which basically means that you can, when you're generating a proof for a shielded transaction, it's making the key that if you were to give it to a third party to view that transaction that no one else can view, it's making that whole process a lot easier and efficient. So, if you're, even just like basic concept, if you're doing taxes and you don't want to have all of your transactions, you don't want to give the tax authorities your private key to spend, but you want to give them some private key to view the transaction. That's a very basic concept that we're working to make more efficient. And then kind of as a supplementary to the future improvements of zero-knowledge proofs in Zcash. We are working on this thing called payment offloading, which would allow to offload that heavy computation to a server side. So, for example, Trezor and Ledger and KeepKey all support Zcash, but they only support transparent addresses because they're just like little things and they don't have memory to do the shielded transactions with. But with payment offloading, then it's over anyway. It's okay. Actually, no, I have one more slide that I wanted to end with. So if you were able to offload that computation to like the Ledger or Trezor servers, then or a personal server, then you could make shielded transactions on a Trezor or all of these little hardware wallets. Okay, and then to end it, I just wanted to do some Bitcoin trolling. So can you read that? It's a little cut off, but it says, Bitcoin, Twitter for your debit card. All your spending sent to that creepy ex-boyfriend, your business competitors, and everyone. And that's it. And like these are all of the ways you can reach us. Obviously, the code's open source. And we have a great community. I forgot to list it there. But it's accessible through the Zcash website. So if you want to join our online community, whether it's the forum or the online chat, we regularly maintain communication with the community. We do most of our development process and communication within the community chat room. It's a very open development process. So if you're interested in that, you can stop in and ask questions and everything. So thank you. We're waiting for after?
We can have questions right now.
Oh, okay.
Questions.
Okay, 2 questions. Go ahead, because you use shielded addresses, so you get it.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Very similar to each other.
Okay.
First of all, Ethereum is going to do this upgrade called Xanthon in
Yeah.
a couple of days.
Yeah.
Sorry. And they plan to integrate ZK snarks to
Yeah.
their
Yeah, they've already tested it.
Yes, and like, what do you think will be the major difference in between Zcash? Because they want to do it vice versa. Zcash wants to implement smart contracts as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're not super... Oh, sorry, yeah. So the age-old question of why Zcash if Ethereum is implementing zero-knowledge proofs, and also vice versa. Zcash is not super, like, I guess we're like relatively interested in the smart contracts thing, but I think we're more interested in the sense that Bitcoin has smart contracts. Like, you can do smart contract things in Bitcoin, but Ethereum implementing zero knowledge proofs, they have such a wide focus that this is just one small piece of their platform, and we have these scientists, and our thought is that we're always going to be like kind of on the bleeding edge and able to research these better improvements. I mean, not to appeal to authority, but Vitalik has also kind of said that Zcash is probably always going to be one step ahead with all of this stuff because they focus on so many other things, like they're like a world computer or whatever. So that's so yeah, there's that, and so we're not super focused on like doing Ethereum style smart contracts. We're a UTXO blockchain, so we're not going to be doing Ethereum level things in foreseeable future. We want to make the privacy like super. We want to be internet money. Like, that's what we're focused on. Yeah.
So you think the major difference will be in like you will focus on privacy?
Yeah.
And Ethereum is going to focus on becoming a world computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. ICOs and stuff.
Yeah.
And I can ask a second question because it's very similar.
Sure.
And like, I think you know the project, which is Tezos.
Yeah.
They made a huge ICO, and your boss is an advisor as well.
Yeah,
as
Zuko.
CEO. I think he received like $20,000 worth of Tezos.
Okay, I don't know.
And they want to implement, or they plan to do set case snarks like zero knowledge proof without the trusted.
Yeah, so everyone says that they want to do, so he was asking about Tezos and saying that they want to do zero knowledge proof without this trusted setup in the ceremony that I was talking about. And that is a thing called Starks. Yeah. Everyone wants to do that. We want to do it. But it's not efficient. So Starks actually came before ZK Snarks. Starks was the like an original research project by this similar scientists, and ZK Snarks came after as a way to actually do it in an implemented production system. So it's just impossible to do right now in blockchains. So yes, when Starks becomes efficient enough for people to use in blockchains, then it's going to be erased to Starks.
But in the case like when Tezos will, or if Tezos will introduce like the set case snarks or Starks without the trusted setup, what do you think will be the point of set cache?
So I apologize. I don't really know too much about Tezos,
Okay.
so I can't really speak to that question. Yeah,
Thanks for that.
no problem. Go ahead.
You say that you want to become internet money, but from what I understood, you're a fork of Bitcoin, which means your supply is limited to 21 million too.
Yep.
So you see that with Bitcoin mined 60 million, that people tend to not spend it because its value increases all the time. But for money, it should be transacted, right? So what's your take on that?
Sure. So they were asking about the tendency for people to hold onto Bitcoin, and how is Zcash going to be different from that if we're a fork of Bitcoin? Yes, we have 21 million tokens. I don't know. Like, I assume people are gonna continue to speculate on cryptocurrencies that don't have a cap, or that do have a cap. And I think personally, I think that's better for the health of the system to have a cap for how many tokens are gonna exist. Maybe there's an argument for regulated, ever increasing inflation such as Ethereum. Over time, obviously, we're going to reach that 21 million and we're going to become closer to it. And maybe with the more blockchains that are coming into existence, you're kind of getting that inflation anyway. So I don't really have an answer to that one either, I guess. I think that's just a more market speculating on how the market uses things. But yeah, sorry. Maybe I'll think about it more and talk to you after. I think I can't. Okay.
Okay, very quick one, since we're talking about privacy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know, but is it possible to revoke the anonymity of the person who is making the transaction? Technically, I don't know if it's supported here in this technology.
If it's possible to revoke the privacy of an address, someone else doing it, or you personally as the owner? Because if you are the owner of an address, then you could potentially reveal the key that would allow other people to view it. For a third party, it would require a similar level of like brute forcing any private key. So it's pretty secure, I guess. I think I'll talk to you after, I guess. I mean, okay, thanks. So this is for the live stream.
Oh, okay.
So,
Organizational announcement. the building will close at 9 p.m. here in the front. So if you want to leave after 9 p.m., then you would need to go in this direction and then leave the building through the main entrance. So it's still open, we're not locking you out, but you cannot exit from here, from this side. You need to go here in this direction, then on the left-hand side, and then you can exit through the main entrance, okay?
I forget the web address, so I always have to go to this.
Or are you ready? Okay, you ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we heard now a lot about Zcash and really interesting details about the technology that makes it untraceable. Now we have here Justin Smith from Monero. He's working for Monero. Justin started 5 years ago with a project. He had a startup. He had an e-commerce startup, and he wanted to accept Bitcoin as a payment solution, and that led him into the crypto space. So without further delay, I hand over to Justin. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll just leave it. Is it possible to expand this to full screen?
Probably press
F11.
F11.
Oh, that one didn't do it.
Michael, kannst du kurz schauen? Wir bräuchten nur noch zurück sozusagen zu der Slide, die gerade da war. Das? Genau. Und das auf Fullscreen, wenn es möglich wäre. Das ist F11. Genau.
Wie geht denn Fullscreen?
Genau, vielleicht dann hier bei
Zoomen. Ach, hier ist es.
Oh, there we go. Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I've been into Bitcoin for some time now, and if you've seen the price today, then that's one of the reasons. You know why. There's a lot of sort of continuous excitement in the cryptocurrency world. And one of the other interesting things about cryptocurrency is the people that are involved in it and the drama that plays out. So there have been a number of stories that have happened over the years that I feel I've been pretty close to, actually. It's one thing to read people's posts in a forum, and then another when you realize that you're seeing that person on the news for one reason or another. So the fascinating thing is that we all get something out of it for ourselves too. We all get a little story out of it, and we all learn something. And I think that's what makes this really interesting is the anecdotes that we have. So I have two anecdotes that I'll share with you that maybe help to explain how I got into cryptocurrency or into Bitcoin in the first place. So some years ago, and this was many years ago, there was a product that came out that banks released, and it's called online banking. And at the time, it was really nice because this is really convenient. You no longer have to get in your car and drive to the bank to do your banking business. Instead, you just opened up your web browser, you entered your username and password, and then you could do everything you needed right there. So your job or your employer would pay your wages directly to a number somewhere. You just gave them this number, and then everything that you did in life then revolved around that web browser and then two little plastic rectangles, your credit and your debit card. And there was an option to withdraw physical cash from ATMs, but that cost money. So you were disincentivized to take out cash. So I behaved in a way that I think most other people behaved, in that I just ended up using credit cards and debit cards for everything. I thought that physical cash was dirty and prehistoric, I mean, this sort of metal slug and piece of cotton in my pocket, these things are hundreds of years old, and this is not modern. This is not, you know, innovative technology. We need to be moving ahead into the digital future. So I'm also the type of person that I like to call it a Kanban system, but I use it in my life. So that means that I never have any food on hand. And so I needed to eat one day, and I didn't have any food in my cabinets. So I went to the grocery store, and when I went to pay, to my surprise, my credit card didn't work. And then my debit card didn't work. And then I realized that I had a little problem. So I had no cash, and so I had to leave the store hungry as I entered it, but then now annoyed that now there was another problem to fix in my life. So I called the person at the bank, and I said, "What's going on? Why aren't my cards working?" And he said, "Oh, it's because we froze your accounts." He said, "We're not sure that we have your current residential address." I said, "Well, that's weird. I gave you my post address. You know, I'm moving pretty frequently now, so that's where I get all of my business mail, and you're my business partner." And he said, "Well, we have to know your residential address." I said, "That's weird. I don't ask any of my business partners or people I work with where they sleep." I said, "Why do you need to know where I sleep?" And he said, "It's because it's the law." And I realized that there was something more going on here than I originally imagined. And after that, I got a pretty funny feeling, you know, because I didn't really have any option at this point. I had somebody's boot on my neck. If I wanted to eat, I had to give this guy my address. I had to tell him where I was sleeping. And so when I connected those dots, that was a strange realization. So after that, I started using cash a lot more. And I closed that bank account. And it doesn't even operate in the United States anyway now. But the realization that I had was that financial sovereignty is something that's really important. And really, it's a tool. So essentially, we use money today to coerce people into doing what we want them to do. And I realized it at that time. And that's how people use money. They use it as a weapon. And so when I started using Bitcoin and I started to really enjoy Bitcoin, the understanding that I always had with Bitcoin is that it is the perfect tool for financial sovereignty. And so I still believe that today, and I think it will continue in the future. And I really think that Bitcoin is, and this is one of the reasons that Bitcoin will be, it is better money and it will be the backbone of the future financial system. But there was another little incident that happened, and that was when I was flying back to Chicago through Miami one time, and I was selected for special screening, and the person put on their white gloves, their latex gloves, and he very carefully went through my bag. He was looking for something, and I don't know what, but I think he was annoyed that he didn't find what he wanted. And so he went over to a computer and he started typing some things in. And then he looked at me and he said, "What were you doing in Bangkok last year? And then what were you doing in Kuala Lumpur just after that? You know, what kind of things were you doing there?" And I thought, but that's strange, you know. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that my flight records are available to certain people. But it's strange to have them wielded in this way, in this circumstance. You know, I knew that he was trying to get something out of me. And that also gives you a funny feeling. So, you know, I told him, and he let me go without incident. You know, it was mutual contempt at that point. So he didn't get what he wanted, and you know, I was disgruntled. So what I realized, though, was that privacy is really important too. And the privacy of your data is super important. And it's not just that one anecdote that, you know, describes why privacy is important. It's important for a ton of reasons, which we don't have time to talk about. But essentially, this was also an idea that crept into my mind. So when I work with cryptocurrency, and when I really was working with Bitcoin a long time ago, what I was always looking for, and I think what a number of other people were looking for, was a way to really make Bitcoin private. And so we knew that privacy was really important for cryptocurrency. We knew that privacy is really important for money. Privacy is important for people, period. And money is, strangely enough, considered a type of speech. And we need to be able to speak freely to each other, depending on the context. So for several years, I looked for a solution, and a number of other people did too. And we looked and looked and looked, and there were a number of proposals that came and went. So there were some proposals that would augment Bitcoin in some way, and none of those really panned out. They weren't feasible. And then there were some proposals where you would fork Bitcoin. There was dark coin and there was black coin. And these things also were not feasible. These things also came and went. And today we have a number of other things that have sort of popped up that claim to be privacy coins. So people understand that privacy is important, but in reality, and from what I've seen, there's really only two alternatives to Bitcoin. And one of those alternatives is Zcash, and then the other alternative is Monero. And and of course I've picked Monero for a number of reasons, but one of those reasons is that in Monero, privacy is not optional. So defaults are really important. If you're into software and you understand software design, you know that the defaults that you give your user are most likely going to stick. So in most cases, your user is just going to go with what you've given them. So what we need to give our users is privacy by default. That's really important. So financial sovereignty has to be a default, and then privacy has to be a default. So let's switch gears a little bit. I've been working with banks and financial service companies now for a little while in Switzerland. And I've learned some things. And one of the things that I've learned is that, I think most of us, when we have just normal bank accounts, we feel pretty vulnerable, Other people can really see, and we don't really know who those people are, but they can see everything that we do with our money. But the reality is that if you're a certain type of person and you have a certain amount of money, you can actually have pretty good privacy with your finances. And really, what I'm saying is privacy is on offer. So there are a handful of people around the planet that have really, really good financial privacy, but it costs. It costs a lot of money. So that's one kind of aspect of banking today. And then the other aspect of banking is that banks have kind of an adversarial relationship with their clients. So banks, of course, are just after making profits, but they want to have all of your money on hand, and they want additional profits. So they want your money, and then they want you to pay them for everything else. So one interesting thing, though, about this privacy that banks offer is that even though it's really good, even though it's really effective, and you can generally trust your private banker, especially if you're very wealthy, sometimes it's not really up to your private banker whether or not your data stays private. So there have been a number of very high-profile data breaches in Switzerland over the last few years, and even in Panama. And so people's data was revealed. It was exposed. And really, it wasn't the fault of the institutions that held that data, right? It was either coerced out of them or it was stolen from them. So actually, the organization itself, its intentions were in the best interest of its customer or its client. But the problem here ultimately is that no matter what type of bank you are or what type of financial institution you are, you're still a third party, a trusted third party. And as a famous person once said, trusted third parties are security loopholes. So that's really a problem. When you have to trust a human to do the job that a machine should be doing, you're going to have more failures. So I think that we have a few new machines that can replace those trusted third parties. So what does banking tomorrow look like? What does the bank of the future look like? So I don't have really a pessimistic view of banks. Rather, I think that today the bank is more of a cost on society. I think it's more of a tax on the productive economy. And I think that in the future that's going to invert. So I think that banks will become part of the productive economy. They'll have to offer really value-added services. And so what are some of those things? So, one of the things that I think banks will start to do is they'll start to audit the code of your software. Most people are not able to evaluate the software that they're using. They can't really tell whether or not there are any loopholes in it. And in fact, few people can. And I mean, that's the reason for open source software anyway, is essentially you have so many dependencies and so many files and so much code in a lot of these software applications, you're not really going to find all of the bugs right away. You need a lot of help. So if you have a professional institution whose only job is to go through and evaluate the likelihood that there's a backdoor or a loophole in the wallet software that you're using, that's pretty nice. I think that's worth paying for. And so I also think that banks will provide backups and restoration services. So as many of you might know, how many people have a fully validating Bitcoin node running right now? How many people own their own money? Yeah, nice. That's great. So I think that you guys understand that there's a problem with being fully responsible for your own money. It's that you're your own enemy. So you need to protect yourself against yourself. And I think that that banks can help provide solutions where they don't hold your money, but rather they help you provide a restoration or backup to your money. So in case you become incapacitated or you're not able to make decisions for yourself, they will help you make arrangements so that people that you actually do trust, multiple parties, can come together at once to help you recover your money. I think they'll also train you for security. So it's really important to have good digital hygiene and good online hygiene. And what that means is that you really need somebody pestering you saying, hey, you're going to get phishing emails, and if you click on them, you could lose a lot of money. And I think the bank might play that role. And then one of the other big issues that we have today is ownership. So in meat space, in the fleshy world that we live in here and that we talk in now, we kind of have a loose understanding of ownership. Do I own this laptop? I don't know. Do I own this laptop? Well, I also don't know. The linkage between the human and the object is something that we all kind of have to agree on. And I think because there's some difficulty in doing that, you really need a trusted third party that specializes in that. So when I buy a house from you, I want to make sure that you actually own the house first. And I might enlist the bank to help me ensure that you actually own the house that you claim to be selling. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, is that I think banks will recommend that clients use Monero and not Bitcoin. And yeah, I think there's one really, really good reason for it. So why not Bitcoin? So I grew up not too far from Chicago, and Chicago has a pretty good history, I think. And in Chicago's recent past, the advice was that if you're walking down the street, you just want to keep looking ahead where you're walking. And if you hear gunshots and screams over here, just keep walking and just get to your destination. You don't want to become aware of what's going on around you. Because if you become aware of what's going on around you, then you could be called to testify as to what you witnessed. And if you're called to testify as to what you witnessed, you might never make it to the witness stand. You might end up at the bottom of the Chicago River because, yeah, that testimony is not going to benefit some people. And I think the same exact thing is true with financial institutions and with corporations that are handling payments today. So the reality today is that most companies and banks are doing the work of what intelligence services used to do. And that's a cost that's imposed upon them. And it's a cost that's imposed upon them because it can be. It's because it's too easy to know this information. It's too easy to collect it. There is no cost to collecting it. It's cheap, it's fast. And so that burden is placed on these companies, and they don't like it. The banks actually do not like their compliance situation because it costs them money. That's their biggest cost. How do we manage this compliance thing? So I think that's why not Bitcoin. So why Monero? Well, I think on a very high level, I like to think of Monero as cash in the mail. So it was not too long ago for me that the internet didn't really exist. So I kind of grew up with the internet. And there was a time when the internet first started where you really couldn't figure out how to buy things from people on it. So it connected you to other people that offered things. You wanted something, and someone else somewhere had it. But how did you pay them? And that was the problem. And we ended up just sort of, using credit cards. It's really the worst thing that you could ever use. But really what you wanted to do was you wanted to put physical notes in an envelope and you wanted to mail it to the person. But there are some problems with that method. So one is the malicious mailman. The person could, along the way, someone could just take the cash out of the envelope and nobody would ever know. The recipient would actually never get the cash, you'd never get your goods, and nobody had any evidence of anything that happened, right? This is an anonymous currency. However, now we have something that's really interesting. I think Monero is a really interesting technology because it is as anonymous as cash. However, you can prove that you sent it. So there's no problem with the malicious actor intercepting it along the way. And yeah, of course it gets there instantly. You're not putting it on a horse and the horse runs across the country to deliver it. So there's no chance of it getting lost. You know that it's going to get there. It's backed by a lot of computational power. If you send the money via Monero, the person gets it almost immediately. And that's it. And then I think there's one other interesting aspect to Monero that is worth noting, and that's that you can actually restore it. So with the euros in your pocket, if I drop some of these on the ground, or this is a 5 franc coin, but if I drop it and I walk away, it's gone. And most likely nobody's going to give it back to me, chase me down and give it back to me. But with Monero, all you need to do is have a little code written down on a piece of paper somewhere. So even though your money is actually stored on your phone, where's my phone? I use my phone as a prop. But even though your money is actually stored on your phone, literally on your phone, that's where your money is. If you lose the phone in the river or in the lake, your money is not gone. You just simply restore it from that piece of paper. So that's quite valuable. So then the other thing is everybody wants to know when. When does this happen? When does this amazing future start to happen? When can I use internet money? When does it go? When does it moon? When? So my answer is that it's happening now. So in Switzerland, the Swiss railway has ticket machines placed all over the country. And they're within walking distance in every village. So pretty much everyone in Switzerland has very easy access to these machines. And through these machines, you can buy a number of digital goods, including Bitcoin. So all you need is a wallet on your phone, a digital wallet on your phone, and some physical notes. And you walk up to this machine, you give it your phone number, it sends you a PIN code, and then you put the notes in, and it gives you the Bitcoin. So that's pretty seamless. That's pretty nice. In fact, that's the very first thing that I do when I come back to Switzerland from any EU country is I put my euros in there. I get rid of the euros right away. I don't want the euros. Anyway, because Bitcoin for me is more valuable, I can more easily buy a VPS. I can more easily register a domain name. I can do all kinds of things. I have more than one foot in the digital world, so it's very convenient for me to have Bitcoin. So anyway, the key or the centerpiece to this entire new world actually is your mobile device. So the important piece of this puzzle is actually how do you get the money that's in your pocket now, today, onto your mobile device? Like, how does it get in there? That's a real challenge that people have. They get excited about Bitcoin, they download a wallet, and they say, okay, well, what now? How do I get the money into the computer? And so this is a way to get the money into the computer. And you need to have a mobile device in order to do that. You need to have a mobile platform in order to do that. And you need to have something that's private as well. So I don't really want people going around just using Bitcoin with these machines. And the reason is that you have to put in your phone number when you buy Bitcoin with these machines. So you're using an anonymous currency, the Swiss franc, right? It's minted on the citizen's behalf by the government. And the government has been authorized to do so, right? And they print this physical cash and they give it to the people to use with their authority. And that's true of every government in the world. So all the governments in the world are printing this totally anonymous cash. And then what's happening now, though, is my passport is actually connected to my Swiss phone number. So it's very tightly controlled. So I'm giving this system my phone number. So now it knows my passport. It knows exactly who I am. It knows my phone number. It knows my location. It knows everything about me. And now I'm taking my totally anonymous Swiss franc and I'm putting it into a system, which is Bitcoin, which is fully transparent, fully traceable. So now every single transaction I make with that Bitcoin I just bought is now linked to my identity and it's tracked throughout the entire system. So it's basically salted and tainted so that people can watch exactly where that money goes. And they track it all the way through. And it happens all day, every day today. If you use an exchange, a Bitcoin exchange, or any other method where you've given out your name or your address or your IP address or anything, it's been linked to you. And in fact, Coinbase, which is one of the most popular brokers, they've been known for shutting down people's accounts. They'll track the Bitcoin 3 hops away. And if that Bitcoin ends up at a gambling site or another website that they don't like, then they just terminate that original person's account, the person where it originated from. So that's pretty dangerous. And so now I'm actually a little hesitant to tell people to go buy Bitcoin in this way. I'm not as excited as I was 5 years ago, let's say. So I'm more excited actually to tell people about Monero, because I think Monero really protects people's privacy as well as their digital sovereignty. And the key to this is we need a mobile wallet for Monero. And it's actually kind of a difficult challenge because of the way Monero works. So I started up a company earlier this year after a friend told me about Monero. He said, hey, check it out. There's this digital currency. It started as a scam, and but some white hat people took it over. Some smart people took it over. It was made by smart people, and then some other smart people had a coup. And there's this interesting thing. So check it out, and I did. And so I really love Monero now. I've only been interested in it for most of this year, but the key missing element was this mobile wallet and this mobile experience. So my idea or my concept is that I think that people would like to use private Swiss banking if they had access to it. I think most people in this room would like to have a numbered Swiss bank account with a private Swiss banker that they could call and talk to. I think that's pretty cool. That's a nice service that people in general would like. And that's really what you can have with Monero. So I see Monero as the new Swiss banking. So I see it as democratizing private Swiss banking, where in the past, or even today, only a handful of really, really wealthy people around the world have access to these services. I think Monero democratizes that service, and I think it delivers it to everybody in this room, and I think it delivers it to everybody in, well, most developed countries. I mean, it's over 1 billion people that have iPhones. So that's who I'm targeting with this app and with this service, and that's how I see the future playing out. Is that Swiss banks were before only able to reach a small number of people that had to come to them, but now they can reach out to over 1 billion people. So that's my take on Monero. Thank you guys for listening. Take a few questions?
Yeah, take two
Sure.
questions.
Okay. Yes.
Something that I don't have in mind. If I want to be part of a very discrete and anonymous system and getting my holdings there, different ones, Monero, Bitcoin, and then some cash, is there some way to start using Monero, then keeping those holdings, different currencies, because I'm not so positive in terms of the Monero price development in the short term, perhaps. How can I be part of this Swiss banking discrete system, starting with Monero and then coming back to other different assets that I may hold?
Okay. So I think the question is how do you sort of speculate on the price of the asset without holding it? Is that?
Not exactly. How can I try to be part of a anonymous system, or having my assets in that system that Monero created to me, and then going back to different assets and different currencies, Bitcoin or even cash, and keeping my discretion and anonymous
Sure.
identity.
Yeah, okay, so how do you transition between Bitcoin and Monero and Zcash? I think that's really the...
You have the fiat currency as well?
Yeah, that's a different beast. Fiat currency, I think, is gone and dead. I think fiat currency will be used by some people, but it won't be me, and it won't be the people that I do business with either. I think the future is already set with Bitcoin. I think that's already done, and then I think we'll use these other assets for very specific purposes, like to get the benefits of private Swiss banking, for example. This is definitely not like a retail payment solution, right? Like you're not going to use Monero to go buy a stick of gum at the store, unless gum is illegal or something like that. I don't know. But that would be a really weird retail payments use case, right? Like I can't imagine anyone doing that. But to transition between these assets, what you have to do is a thing called a cross-chain atomic swap. And so the Zcash team is actually experimenting with this technique. I think Decred is also experimenting with this. And essentially, and Litecoin and Bitcoin, of course, you can already do cross-chain atomic swaps. But the idea is that this is a completely peer-to-peer exchange. But what you have to have is you have to have a fully validating node for both currencies, for both assets that you're going to be exchanging. So you need to be running a full node for Bitcoin. You need to be running a full node for Monero if you want to do those cross-chain atomic swaps. If you want to add a third one in there in Zcash, you need to have a full Zcash node as well with the full blockchain. So you'll have a lot of storage requirements. Yes?
So, because the keyword atomic swap was
prove that I own something if I cannot be tracked? So how to prove to somebody who does not have Monero that I have Monero?
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, you can always reveal your balance. You can always sign with your public key, just like in Bitcoin. So if you want to prove for some reason that you own a certain amount, you can do that. You can also reveal your transactions with your private key. So you can prove mathematically that you actually did pay someone, or that you, for example, that you actually did pay your taxes with it. That would also be a use case for the private spend key, or private view key, rather. Other questions? Yes?
I have a question about the tax thing. If
Sure.
it's all private, then how do countries ensure that you're paying an appropriate tax rate?
Yeah. So I guess my question back to you is, how do they do it today with physical cash that they provide? I mean, I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, right? Like,
I've worked under the table for a few years, and I didn't pay. I got paid in cash, and I didn't pay tax on it, as
Yeah.
far as I know. So then I'm sure that so it would be the same if I have it locked up in cryptocurrencies. Then I also
Yeah.
is like working.
you'll for sure be audited this year since this is live streamed. No, I mean, basically the people. Oh, okay. Still, even worse. So I think the answer though is that is that people sort of course, it's a very cultural thing too, and it's a very national thing, and so I think it's Americans number one and Germans number two, or vice versa, in terms of how fervent we are with paying our taxes and making sure that gets taken care of. And then I think as you get down into Venezuela or Argentina or something, it's something different. But I mean, this is a different culture. This is a totally different story. This is not for us to decide. This is for people to decide locally how they handle these things. But I mean, I know that basically I'm being watched and the endpoints are being watched. So the people I do business with, I mean, these things are all trackable and traceable. And so, if you're supposed to pay taxes, then you just pay your taxes. Because if somebody does come knocking on your door, they'll audit you and they will compel you to, they'll look at your books. Cash business has been done for a really long time. I mean, the reason going back to my Chicago example, the reason Al Capone went to jail was for tax reasons, right? But all of his stuff, he's arguably one of the best, money launderers, criminals, or whatever you could ever imagine. Yes?
So if you're moving between Bitcoin and Monero, for example, through a cross-chain atomic swap, how is just moving from, say, Bitcoin to a fresh Litecoin address back to a fresh Bitcoin address not anonymous?
So the question is, what's the difference between a cross-chain atomic swap and...
Through Monero versus through Litecoin or Zcash or anything.
Okay.
Even a non-private, non-anonymous.
Sure. So
to one-use address that you're swapping.
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, it's the technicals of it are pretty complex, but on the surface of it, what we're actually saying is that I have some assets here of type A, and I have some assets of type B. You have some assets of type A, and you have some assets of type A and type B assets. And then really what we want to do is we just want to safely exchange those between the two of us. And that means with cross-chain atomic swaps that no third parties are involved. So we just need to discover each other, and I need to discover that you want to sell a certain amount of asset A, and I want to buy a certain amount of asset A, and then
let's say there's not even two parties. Let's say there's one party.
Sure.
Me and me, right?
Sure.
I know that, let's say my BTC are tracked and tainted and probably linked to me. If I fire up a full Litecoin node,
Yeah.
generate a new address,
Yeah.
put some Bitcoin into that,
But you
trickle
can't.
that back out through to new Bitcoin address.
So you can't send transactions across chains. Yeah. So you actually, so these are incompatible protocols basically.
But with atomic swaps, they're kind of not, right?
So atomic swaps mean that you're involving a couple other techniques. So you're involving a pay-to-script hash and you're involving a time lock. So essentially the atomic swap is you are actually trading with another human. Yeah, I mean, if like essentially once you're using an asset of a certain type of protocol, it will always be traceable on that protocol. So if you're using Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network, it's always traceable through there. If you're using Litecoin on the Lightning network, it's always traceable through there. And I mean, just because you send yourself a transaction doesn't mean that now it's private or that it's been unlinked. It maybe does.
Even once it jumps chains.
That's the only